Hey everybody, it's Sam here, Head of Programs at Smart School Councils, and this video is all about how to run an effective communications team. I guess it comes about because we've had a few requests from our member teachers for some support with their communications team. And I think that's something that would happen for new schools in our program, but also for our older members who are having some particular issues around the pandemic and the way that social distancing works in schools at the moment. So that's why this CPD exists. And if you're here watching it, it's fantastic to have you. Hopefully it'll be helpful for you. And if you need extra help, give us a shout. So our aim in this video is to share our strategy for how we run an effective comms team. We as a charity go into lots of our member schools to help train young people to become effective comms team members. And this video takes the content for how we train them and also gives it a bit of a sort of socially distanced twist as well. So these are things we're going to be looking at, I guess, as we go through it. And the key messages to remember at the start is that it is quite early in the academic year. We're recording this video in November, and it will take time for your comms team to embed themselves in their new roles. And the aim is that they'll become self-managing across the academic year. There are particular barriers to achieving that this year that we need to take into consideration, but there are simple steps to overcome them. We'll be talking about those as we go forward. And I think what I wanted to do is kind of share, I think largely so that you feel like you're not alone, some of the sort of issues that some of our members are currently facing when it comes to their comms team. And here's one. This comes from a teacher recently that said, look, my question is, how do you run a successful comms team when members are in different bubbles, so they come from different year groups, they aren't able to meet necessarily, and that they don't have any other teacher to support? I wonder if this is your situation, and if so, please know that you're not the only one around it, and that this CPD, or this video rather, is going to be there to try and answer some of these questions. Or you might be a bit like this teacher, who emailed us talking about how they were struggling before the pandemic with their communications team, and how maybe they had too many members. And this is the key bit for their email, I think. I'm finding that I don't have enough time. 20 minutes on Thursday morning is not enough to run an effective communications team. I really want this to work. We have to think somehow of a way of pushing it and supporting the kids so they can take ownership of it themselves. That is a common thing that we see, that sometimes the success of a communications team and your student leaders depends a little bit about having you as the lead teacher for your Smart School Council driving and pushing it forward. So we went to this school, we helped this particular teacher and their young people through training to become more self-managing, and now they're doing a really good job at that. So yeah, I wanted to share those with you to start off with, to say that you're not alone. These are issues that we know that some of our teachers face, and this is how we try to tackle it. So how are we going to do this? Right, we're going to share with you three steps that we think are the foundations for a successful communications team, for well-managed and functioning student leaders who know what their role is, who know how to do it, and know why they're doing it. Step one is sharing the big picture. Step two is having clearly defined roles. And step three is having regular, purposeful, and structured meetings. So step one is how we start when we go into school. And what you can see here, actually, let me just take a step back. There is kind of a pre-step to these steps, and that is selecting the right people to be on your communications team. If you haven't done that yet, we've got a separate CPD that you can see on the slide at the moment that's playing, that talks all about how you should select them, how you can do it this year, particularly when you might not be able to do elections, you might not be able to do open voting because of the social distancing issues you have. So I would encourage you to check that out. If you look across our YouTube feed, you'll be able to see the video about selecting your comms team. If you haven't done that yet, pause this video, go back, listen to all the different strategies that different teachers are taking to select and run their comms team, and then come back to us to find out more about what the key ingredients are for them being a success this year. Right, now we can go on to step one. So step one is sharing the big picture. This is what we do when we go into schools and start the comms team training. And it's about making sure that the concept is shared and the rationale is shared, that hopefully gives your young leaders a sense of importance and also gives them a sense of responsibility over the roles that they now have. And we asked them to share their experiences, and we asked them questions like, okay, well, you're student leaders, you're on the communications team, your job is to help everybody else to get involved in having their voice heard. Why does that matter? And these are the questions that we ask. What does it feel like to not be listened to? And there'll always be, I'm sure, in a group of young people, one or two who will have those experiences of being ignored or have those experiences of being marginalized, will be able to share what those emotions feel like. Why is it important to listen to everybody? And the third question is a fascinating one, because when we ask it, you'd be quite surprised by the response. Who is best placed to make decisions about our school and about us as young people? And often the answers will be, oh, the teachers or the head teacher or the governors, parents sometimes. Not always is the answer, it's us. And I think it's okay to challenge that and say, well, why isn't it okay for young people themselves to make decisions about their schools? Because it affects their lives more than anybody else's. And this is sowing the seeds through these really good and enriching conversations, I think, for the purpose of why we meet and why they've got this huge responsibility that they should step up to the challenge of doing well at, which is that if we, and this is your key message, if we don't do our jobs, without us, without the communications team, everybody else in the school doesn't get their voice heard, doesn't get involved in pupil voice, doesn't get to experience democracy. And actually that really matters. Now, our top tip for this step with your comms team, and it's okay to do this, I think, at any point in the year. If it hasn't been done already, it's a really good moment to pause and just set those foundations for why this matters, is to create a sort of leadership charter. And this is what we do with our young people. We ask them what it means to be a leader, what the qualities and characteristics of leadership are. They co-create a set of 5 or 6, however many is going to be, criteria for what leadership looks like, and they sign up to it. And that's what they are sort of, as if you want to think of it as a contract, obliged to do when they're performing the role of the communications team. This is an example from one of our member schools of what their leadership charter came up with: being kind, being sensible, respecting everybody, not being bossy, being clear when you're listening. Lots of them will be about punctuality, about turning up, doing your job. We get them to physically sign up to them as a part of becoming your communications team. So I'd encourage you to do that. It is the step at which, if it's done well, will help your young people to overcome any barriers that they face moving forward, because they know that, okay, it's wet and I don't want to do my role today, or it's really sunny outside, I want to go and play with my friends. When those challenges, when they face the challenges, you can come back to the, okay, well, why does this job matter? What is being on the communications team all about? And then that will act as the emphasis for doing the things they should be doing. So that's our first step, and it's a really important one. Our second step is, when those foundations are in place and everybody knows why they're there, it's about then being really practical and simple with what they need to do. So step 2 is having clearly defined roles. When we train communications teams, or we train young people to be the communication team, say that there are 5 core roles that every comms team should have. And these core roles are all around making sure that the other elements of the Smart School Council run and are conducted well. And we'll talk about those in a little bit more detail in a second. Elsewhere, we think that there's a good number for a communications team, and we think that's about 10 or 15. I think that they can sometimes be a lot bigger, particularly if you're a new school joining our program and you're transitioning from the traditional way at school councils. You might have 30 because you've got a representative from each class, or you've got a number of representatives from each year group, whatever it might be. That's probably a bit too big, but that's okay for the first year in the program at least, and you can start to reduce it a little bit to a smaller team that's easier to manage both for themselves and for yourself. And what we suggest is that with a number of sort of 10 or 15, you have multiple people doing each role so that they can work as a team, and that you've got more than one person you can depend upon to do that role. And then whilst there will be need to meet as a team, which you might be doing virtually at the moment, which we'll touch on later on, because there will be some things the team need to decide as a whole when reviewing how many your class meetings or your action teams. Actually, each of these jobs can be done independently. They can be done at different times, they can be done in different places, they can be done without everybody needing to be in one place at the same time, which gives you a degree of flexibility that might be really important right now. One of the things that you'll be looking at if these 5 core roles are new to you, how you might attribute them. And this is our top tip, which is to do a skills sharing exercise where the members of the comms team suggest roles for each other. This is really fun. I really enjoy doing it in schools. And I think it challenges young people a little bit to think, okay, well, not what role do you think you would be best at, but if you all share your skills, and you might ask questions like, what are you best at? What do you enjoy most at school? What are your talents? Whatever. The answers to those questions can be transformed into skills, and then the young people can suggest roles for other members of the team. Oh, this young person's got the best handwriting in their class. The cursive handwriting is amazing. Oh, I think that skill would mean you'll be really good at being, for example, the progress board updater. If you don't know what that role is, I'll talk about it more in a second. But yeah, it's a really fun exercise and gets them to think about and foster that sense of team and community as they do it. The key message for step 2 is that the team will be way more effective if everybody knows what their role is and they know how to do it. And that becomes just an organic habit across the academic year. So let me talk about those roles a bit more. Here are the 5 core roles, and I'll talk about them each individually in a moment, and I'll talk about how you might go about performing those roles whilst adhering to social distancing guidelines as well in a moment. But let's just start with what they are. So there's the progress board updater, the question finder, the class meeting tool leader, the staff liaison, and the action team developer. That's it. That's the core jobs or the core roles that will mean that your whole Smart School Council functions when they're performed regularly. There are loads of other roles that maybe are important to have as well, or roles that are more traditional to what a school council looks like. And you might want to assign those as and when you need them. So, for example, if you need somebody to go and speak to the governors, you might ask somebody specifically to double up with that role. Some of our schools have a pupil voice or Smart School Council Twitters, and if somebody has a role of updating them, if they're allowed to do that. So yeah, those are supplementary and important, but for the functioning of this intervention in your school, the 5 are the most important things to have in place. And let's talk about them in specific detail. We'll talk about what the role is, and then also what the requirements of the role are, what the young person needs access to perform them. And with a bit of creativity, there should be a way of doing that, even if we can't meet or we can't get access to things we would normally do. So class meeting tool leader, what is that? Okay, well, their role is to set up and review the class meetings and the data that's generated when your school has completed them. So these little cards, by the way, that I'm reading from, or you can see on the slides, are a part of a pack, a comms team pack that we give out through the comms team training. If you want us to come in and train your students for you, I'll mention how you can do that at the end. But you can also get access to those packs through our website as well. So I set up the class meeting tool. That's my job. I work with the staff liaison. They help me to do my role. In between comms team meetings, I check how many classes have done their meetings. And then in the comms team meetings themselves, I log in and check the results and set up a new meeting. What do they need access to? Well, they need a username and a password to get into the website, which you will set up through your username and password. It's a limited version of the website that just allows them to review the results and set up a new question. And they need technology. They need access to a computer or a tablet to do that. And that's it. That's all they need. it is a role that can be done independently. Certainly the checking up on which classes have and have not done their class meetings is something that they can do in 5 minutes in the class or in lesson time, whatever. And if they can't get access to the ITT suite anymore, then this can be done fairly effectively on a tablet too. I'll talk a bit more as we go into the third step about how these things come together in an actual meeting, but that's the class meeting tool leader. Progress board updater. If you don't know what progress board is, we do talk about it in the CPD that launches your time on your Smart School Council program. It is a place in the school where you have a board that is there to be the sort of point of communication for what your school council is up to in terms of the class meetings that you've had, the results for them, the progress of any projects you're doing, action teams, things like that. And somebody needs to update that and be in charge of responsible for making sure that it's updated regularly. And this is the progress board updater. So I update the progress board. Work with the action team developer. In between communications team meetings, I update the progress board, and in the comms team meetings themselves, I listen and make notes on what happened in class meetings or action teams so that I then can go and update the board. All they need to do their job is access to the progress board and the equipment they need to update it. And again, that's something that they can do independently. They don't require anybody else's support to do that. That shouldn't be, as far as I can imagine, something that will be restricted by social distancing at the moment. Provided that the equipment includes things that, you know, clean the board to make sure that it's something that other people can access and be aware of. Staff liaison. Love this role. I keep making this point, but I'll make it again anyway. If I think of myself when I was in primary school, this is the role I would love to have had. The role is that they help and remind classes to do their class meetings. Essentially, this is the people or person that will go around and sort of remind teachers who may be the more forgetful types to do their class meetings and help them to run them. In between communication team meetings, I get as many classes as possible to do their class meetings, and in the comms team meetings themselves, I plan how to get more classes to the meeting and ways I can support them. So what do they need to do their role? So they need a way of communicating with staff. Now, this might be a challenge at the moment. Traditionally, what we suggest is that staff liaisons, at the time that you ask your colleagues to do their staff meetings, are around the school, popping into classes and asking if they can help teachers to do them or remind them if they haven't done them yet. That may not be possible because of social distancing bubbles at the moment, but there are creative ways to go around this. You could have staff liaisons that represent particular year group bubbles or class bubbles. Cool. You could, and some of our teachers do this, set them up with emails, because the comms team very often has its own email that they send out the class meeting links to teachers through. So you might have a staff liaison email that says, oh, hey, Mr. Jones or Mrs. whoever, we can see that you didn't do yours last week. Can you please do it this week, or can we help you to do it this week? That way of communicating is important. I talked to a member yesterday who suggested that what they would do is leave notes for teachers at reception, for reception to distribute, that reminds their staff if they haven't done the previous week's meeting. So that's a good way of doing it as well. What else do they need? They need sort of suggestions for ways to support teachers if needed, which can be problematic at the moment. They can't go into a classroom and run the meeting for the teacher, but there are other ways you can consider that. So that's staff liaison. Question finder, these are all about, this role is a really important one. It's all about thinking of suggestions for questions that you'll use in your class meetings. In between class meetings, I find class meeting questions, write them down. In the comms team meetings, I present the questions I found. And by find, we mean sort of, who do we go to find questions? Is it that we go to young people directly who might have a question? Is it we go to staff, maybe people who are responsible for curriculum development, or people responsible for PSHE, whatever, and talk about how class meetings can support them? Again, a bit like the staff liaison, the thing that they need is a way of communicating with staff. We mentioned that already. And what they need then is a notepad or something to store their ideas. It's an important role, this one, because what you don't want in your comms team meetings is to ever be lost for an idea for a class meeting. And so getting as many of these as possible is a really advantageous thing to do. Lastly then, and Finally, action team developers. Action team developers are young people on your comms team who help action teams to get up and running and hold them accountable. So if they say that they're going to be meeting at this time in this place to do their activity, that they are there and they do turn up and they do them. Now, if you're new to the program, you might not be thinking about action teams until later in the academic year, and that's absolutely fine. If you're one of our older member schools, you might not be doing action teams at the moment because this is the part of the program that is quite sort of fundamentally compromised by the idea that young people can't mix together in social distance outside their social bubbles. If you have found a way of doing them, like for example having action teams set up within year group bubbles or within class bubbles, then fantastic. What the action team developer would need is a way of communicating and checking up on them. If you're not doing this until after Christmas, that's also okay. So that's step 2, and I think that's a really important step to think about. Okay, how am I going to attribute these roles to my comms team? How am I going to support them to understand what their role is about and make sure they've got all of the equipment and all of the access they need to go and do them, because that's going to mean that's the biggest part of them being effective in their role. Alongside, finally, step 3, which is, okay, when we have everybody knowing their roles and knowing the purpose behind why they're on the team, what do the meetings themselves look like? How can they make sure that they are regular, purposeful, and structured? Take a deep breath, Sam. So here are some principles that we found through our members really help with this. That they should meet at the same time and place. And if you can do this, I know it's a challenge, but if you can, don't use the young people's break time or lunch times. If we're going to prioritize pupil voice in our school, and if we understand its value and think it's fundamental to young people in their development and their well-being, then we should be allocating some time to do it that doesn't disadvantage them from the rest of their peers. I would make that argument to SLT if I wasn't a member of it. And I think that it's something that they would be responsive to. If you do have to use their play out lunchtime, that's fine, but we go forward. Structure your meetings based around running class meetings. And it can be as simple as this. Week A, your school does your class meeting. Week B, your communications team meeting. The communication teams rather meet to review the results, decide upon an action, and set up a new meeting. And then week C, your school runs the meeting, and then you go in that sort of cycle across however regularly you're going to have class meetings. I'll share with you our format for it in a little while, but that is the basic structure that gives you purpose to these meetings. And then lastly, the other tip we've got, I guess, is about setting the expectations that the jobs that we've just discussed don't happen in the meetings, they happen before them, and the meeting is there to update on the progress that's been made and decide upon the team elements like actions that result from a vote in the class meetings. Top tip here is, again, you don't have to physically meet, you can do it virtually. And if actions are completed in advance, the meetings themselves can be really quite short. There can be things that can be completed in 10 or 15 minutes if you're just updating everybody on what's been done in the week or the weeks before, and then reaching an agreement as a team as to about how you move forward with actions. If you remove, this is our key message, the obstacles in advance, they'll be more successful in their roles. And so what I thought would be useful for us to do at this point then is to share with you how we structure a communications team meeting. And what I'll do in the YouTube sort of in the video around us is put in the comments below a link to this, so that if you're seeing it for the first time, you can either magpie it or you can create your own version of what it looks like. Let me just get that up really quickly. Here it is. So you may recognize that it looks very similar to something called the class meeting tool, and that's the way we've designed it, but it is just a Google slide. So we welcome everybody to the communications team meeting. We share our leadership charter and all of the sort of the ethics and the ethics behind why we exist. And then we talk about how this meeting is going to run. Okay, so we're going to look at the results of the last meeting. We're going to tell the rest of the school and decide upon an action. We're going to set up our next meeting, and we're going to check on the progress of action teams. And the way that this slide works is that it will direct the people who have the roles to do their job at the right time. So let me show you an example. Okay, so class meeting tool leader, please will you log in here to the website and then tell us what the question was we asked last time. Tell us the winning option. It directs them in quite a prescriptive way to do their roles throughout the meeting, which is what makes it really purposeful. Fantastic. It's a reminder of what the class meeting tool leader does if it's needed. Great, now that we know what the result was, progress board updater, please make a note of the question and the result, and then after the meeting, go and update the progress board with the results so the rest of the school know what was decided and what won. Staff liaison, please write down the classes that didn't take part. If they didn't, make a note of the first class who completed it, because what we encourage them to do is celebrate the class who completes it first each week in some way, whether it's, I don't know, a verbal celebration or a prize, something like that. And step 3, after the meeting, go and then speak to those teachers who missed out and remind them to take part. Next time, update Ms. Topwell is the teacher who leads this particular school, so you might want to update your lead teacher as well about who didn't get involved. Then at this point, then you've got an action for everyone. Everybody, now that we know the result of the question, what is going to happen next? What do we as the leadership team think is the right thing to do? So if, for example, the question was about how safe do you feel in school during the coronavirus pandemic? And the result of that was, oh, we're worried about social distancing in the corridors. Then at this point, the team need to decide, okay, what we're going to do about this. Now we know that's the thing people are worried about. How can we make it better? Who do we need to go and speak to? What ideas have we got? How do we take this forward? And that's that group discussion. It's a really enriching one. I think that they're the highlights of the meetings. Then after that's been decided, the question finder tells us, okay, what's our idea for the next class meeting? What question we're going to ask. Class meeting tool leader, please enter this into the tool, and then just remind us about how many ideas you've got for the future, and do you need to go and find any more. And then lastly, action team developer, let us know, like, okay, how many ideas have we got from action teams at the moment? How have we set any of them up? What's happening with our current action teams? Are they meeting? Are they being successful? Do they need support from us? And then when you've updated us on all of those, that's it. That's the end of the communications team meeting. And this is the structure that we think provides total purpose for the success of these meetings, and also reminds people of what they should be doing. And then again, like the class meeting tool, the more you do, the more it becomes a habit, the more it gets embedded. So, like I said, I'll put that in the comments, or in the sort of bit underneath the title, I can't remember what it's called, so you can access it via a link. Okay, so to wrap up then, those are our 3 tips with some COVID info and some ideas for a bit of creativity to make sure they can work at the moment in school. How can we help you further? Right, well, you can get one-to-one support to discuss your school's experience if you like, and you can access that for free. If you want to, I've been alluding to it a lot, you can buy communications team training from us as an organization, and we can do that with your young people. You can do it in person, we can do it online, depends on what you feel most comfortable with at the moment. And then there are packs and badges that you can buy to support your team through our website also. So, can't answer any questions in this format, but if you do have any, please feel free to reach out to us. You know how to email us at membership@smartschoolcouncils.org.uk, and thank you very much for your time. I really hope this was useful.